What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 14 of the Switch It Up podcast. Today, we'll be talking the Seattle expansion draft, giving our recap of what went down there, all the trades that happened on the Saturday, basically just an NHL recap. We'll also be debating a couple of notes that we've come up with and some Olympic stuff as well. But without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing I wanted to start with today is going over our our ridiculously bad fantasy mock draft for the expansion team. I mean, so we, credit to us, did it a week prior to when the protection lists were released. But to those of you who watched that episode, you'll now know that I think collectively I had 4 correct and Huz had 3 correct in total of the entire roster. Now, most of that was because I believe of Huz's roster, 7 players were traded prior to the actual expansion draft, which was absolutely crazy. And then obviously things we didn't anticipate, like Carey Price being protected, and obviously Seattle playing it a lot more safe when it comes to salary cap. Now, actually going off their draft list and like what they did, you can tell they went a very different route from Vegas. Like Vegas kind of was negotiating like crazy, and they kind of tried to get as many picks as possible, and they even took a few larger contracts. With Seattle, we really didn't see that. We saw them like playing almost entirely low budget and trying to save as much cap space as possible, which I think is great to a degree, but some of the picks just didn't make sense to me. I don't know.
Man, like I got screwed over. Just like I had Caleb Jones. I'm just looking at my roster right now. Caleb Jones, Richard Panik, and then Aiden Hill traded.
Yeah.
And then I had a couple others as well that got traded later on. Right before, I think it was a day of the expansion.
It was.
Where the teams had to kind of release their final list.
Yeah.
And then Jared McCann gets traded to Toronto. And then Toronto loses him into the expansion draft. So I got that one right, but just from the wrong team.
Yeah.
So but I'll still count it in my books. But still, like obviously, like looking back at it, if we were to do that draft after the final, the final list was released, then we'd be a lot closer than just having 3 and 4
For
guys.
sure. I think so. I want to go through what we did and didn't like about the draft, and I think for me there was a few things of note. The first one being that obviously they played it a lot closer to the salary cap. They didn't make any giant trades for picks. They didn't really do any of what Vegas did at all. One pick that really stood out, which made almost no sense, was from Philadelphia. Like, they finished with what I believe was close to like 67 million. So they have like 20 plus $million in the cap, which is crazy. But the Philadelphia pick was Carson Tywernenski, which I think caught us both off guard for sure. But you had guys like Shane Gostisbehere, who was later traded, James Van Riemsdyk, and Jakub Voracek, all available. Obviously, they went the route of saving cap, but this guy's a minimum player who's an RFA, who's not signed, who is a borderline NHLer. When you had, if you were like going through Philly's protected roster, like you had guys who were actual NHLers, like Rob Haig, who was later traded in the Rasmus Ristolainen deal, which we'll get to later.
Right.
He was available. He's a minimum deal, and he is a bona fide NHLer on a third pair on almost any team in the league. And you take a guy who is arguably not an NHLer and probably won't be, which is, I mean, it's just a strange pick. So that was one thing.
I think they're tanking from the get-go.
Yeah,
next year's first overall pick.
They honestly might be, and that honestly might be a good call because you got 2 of the next 3 drafts have absolute bona fide studs in them, Shane 100%. Wright and Bedard, or even Mikheyev or Michikov or whatever his name is, the Russian kid who everybody's comparing to Ovi.
Right.
Another pick, obviously of note, is the Leafs trade Jared McCann. The Leafs trade for Jared McCann to protect Justin Holl and Alex Kerfoot. And you know what? I think obviously Kyle will have done his due diligence there, and he would have discussed the price of protecting a Kerfoot or a Holl with Ron Francis in Seattle. And this was obviously a way to get the price down. So I like it. It was a decent move, but like it does suck to when you get a guy like Jared McCann to immediately lose him, especially when you get him for that price.
Mm-hmm. I guess keeping the team the same, that's the same atmosphere around was important for Dubas and the guys in the room.
Yeah.
I don't mind it, to be honest. Honestly, like Jared McCann is a great player to have on the ice with the guys. So we'll see how it plays out for the start of the season. I think the first game's October 13th, which is almost just about 2 months away, really. Which obviously we're really excited for.
Yeah, for sure.
But I kind of want to see like a change in the dressing room in the terms of just the guys stepping it up to a different level, in terms of physicality, not just their offensive scoring, but.
Yeah, I think I mean, if we're going down that Leafs rabbit hole, for sure they need to add a top six forward, and they also need to add a goalie, um, because you can't go into next season. You have to go into next season at least as good as you were at the start of the season before, especially with if you want to start getting into these trades that happened on the Saturday there. Like the Atlantic Division now is absolutely insane. Like obviously the Lightning lose Yanni Gord, and I think that was a big get for Seattle, probably one of their better picks. But I mean, apart from that, the Florida Panthers add a guy like Sam Reinhart for a first round pick, so that's absolutely incredible. Um, a bunch more teams are adding. Like if the Saturday trade like craziness was probably one of the most exciting days ever in NHL, like for trades. It was just nonstop, like superstar after superstar was traded.
Yeah, it
But
was great.
so
I'm at work. I'm literally working, and
yeah,
every 5 minutes you're texting me like, "Oh, this guy's going here. This guy's
yeah,
going
it
there. This
was
guy's going here." I'm like,
absolutely
"Oh my god,
incredible.
man! I literally can't keep up. Like, what's going
Yeah,
on?"
it was something else. But the first one that I think was shocking to a lot of people was the Ristolainen trade, and the
Mhm.
price that Philadelphia paid for a
Yeah.
guy who's like really on paper not good.
Did you see
So
what Philadelphia like? Basically, what they lost versus what they got.
no, what was it?
Man, it was something ridiculous. Like they lost like I think it was like 8 or 9 players, and their assets that they got in return were just two guys.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like
That
I
was
don't know
it.
what Chuck Fletcher's doing. They lost. Obviously, you paid to get rid of Shane Gostisbehere, who had a better wins above replacement than Ristolainen, which is just crazy, and on less money. Obviously, he signed longer term, but that to me is craziness. And then the Ryan Ellis deal, I think I appreciated a little bit more. Ryan Ellis is a stud, stay-at-home defenseman. His wins above replacement is pretty good. But man, you could tell Philly's making a push. And then they just traded again for Cam Atkinson. They did the Cam Atkinson Jakub Voracek swap, which I think for them is incredibly a good deal because Voracek
Hmm.
has fallen off significantly, and Cam Atkinson has been a solid 25 goal scorer for a lot of seasons in a row now.
Yeah, like I guess Ron Ellis is a great defenseman for them to have.
Yeah.
But like again, like losing a player like Nolan Patrick is not. I guess he didn't want to be in that dressing room, so I'm sure there's
Yeah.
something else that's wrong rather than just him. But still, it's like a first rounder, like early first rounder, second overall pick. That's just given up.
Yeah, and we've talked about it briefly before, but like he just never lived up to his potential. I think a change of scenery will be a great thing for him. Like I think he'll kind of
Yeah, like
thrive.
he,
And
he has been injured for most of his career, right? So you got to look
yeah,
at it, like kind of put that into perspective as well. But
yeah,
I guess you're right with the change of scenery. Hopefully in Vegas, where
he'll be a
it's
stud.
it's a lot of fun to play.
Yeah.
So hopefully he does kind of pan out to be the player he's supposed to be.
The next thing I want to talk about is the Columbus Blue Jackets because holy shit, did they do an absolute immense thing. Now, I know a couple Blue Jackets fans, and I think one thing that needs to be addressed about that franchise is they don't know how to keep their players or keep their stars. I don't think it's any fault of their own, but it is very apparent that the market is just like they have a real problem keeping their players. Guys like Matt Duchene walked, Artemi
Hmm.
Panarin gone. Now
Yeah,
you got
is
Seth
Nike
Jones
was
gone.
still with them, or did he walk as well with
I think he
Duchesne?
is still, but I think he's also a free agent. So I think he's you probably get him back because he's pretty old and not a great player. But you're losing guys like now the only guy who I've ever remembered wanting to be in Columbus, Cam Atkinson, gone, which is
He's gone.
crazy.
Yeah.
Nick Foligno gone, who was like the core of that franchise.
I
For
think I
7
think I think
years.
Nick Foligno goes back to Columbus just because his family's from there, or they're there right
Right,
now.
but
And
just in terms of who they've moved out, like
yeah,
you move him out, you
I
moved
mean,
Savard out.
if you're getting a first round pick for Nick Foligno, I'm taking that
Oh,
any day of the
of
week.
course.
So
I'm just saying, like in terms of a franchise change,
yeah,
he's gone. Savard is gone. Dennis Savard,
right.
who went to Tampa. You
Mhm.
have Seth Jones now goes to the Blackhawks for just an insane haul of players and picks. Like, you get Boquist to replace him, who's younger and who is a first round pick, I believe, like 6th overall. So that's really good. You
Mhm.
get 2 first round picks. One of them was a swap, and then you get Chicago's pick next year and a 2nd round pick. So like
Right.
for that, the value there is incredible. But I mean, regardless of that, you have to, draft picks can help you only so much. You have to be able to re-sign your players. And obviously Patrick Laine is another one where he's likely to sign a 1-year deal to stay there. But then after that, you're walking him into free agency, and he's probably going to walk. So Columbus has got to get their heads together and kind of, if they're in full rebuild mode now, which I think they
Mhm.
are, then I mean,
What I don't understand is
yeah,
continuing on to what we're talking about with Saturday is not just like the trades. Well, the trades all did make sense. Obviously, some teams got fleeced.
yeah, they did.
Looking at Detroit and whoever they or was it Stevie Y that who was
Yeah,
it?
man.
Now I can't remember.
The
But
Detroit one was Nedeljkovic and
Nadal, yeah,
Carolina.
like
That trade was craziness,
it
man.
does not make any sense. But they
I
worked it
think.
out. But what
Go
I was
ahead.
trying to go on and talk about was more of the contracts that players are signing right now. Like,
Yeah,
why are teams overpaying for these players? Like, look
it
at
seems to be a July 1st, or I guess in this case a July 28th kind of habit. Like, teams
yeah,
overpay at free agency to start for players. It's
I don't get it.
unbelievable.
Like how's Seth Jones making less money or yeah, like then or more money than Kale McCarr?
Yeah, it's
Like, it
bananas. It
makes no
doesn't make
sense.
sense. It doesn't make any sense. I think part of that is that Seth Jones is Chicago is buying free agent years, like they're buying UFA years
Yeah,
away. But I mean, as is Colorado, right? Like, but Seth Jones is far closer to being an unrestricted free agent, and Kyle
right.
McCarr is still locked as an RFA.
Well, who
But at
would
the
you
same
take?
time, like, it's not even close.
Yeah, like who? So looking at two players right now, who would you take as your like if you had just pick one of them as your defenseman? Who would it be? Like, would it be Alexiak or Adam Larson?
Out of those two
Yeah, like
specifically,
who do you think would get paid more?
I mean, that's really tough. I would say Adam Larson would be the
Yeah,
obvious answer because he's a
yeah,
higher draft pick. He's done more in the NHL, but
yeah,
like, I guess Alexiak got more, right? Which is
yeah. That's what
just,
makes no sense.
it's
Like he got
crazy.
like with Seattle. Seattle's paying him for like 4.6 mil over 5 years
Yeah.
or 23 mil over 5 years, which comes down to 4.6 a year. Whereas in Larson's signed for 4 years at 16,
Yeah.
right? Which is 4 year. Like I guess with the term, it makes sense that he signed longer, but the player like Adam Larson compared to a Jamie Lexington, like no,
I know. It
like
doesn't
Jamie
make
Lexington is
sense.
just big. He's big. He's a big player. He's just big. I guess just size on the ice, but Larson can actually play hockey.
Yeah, he's pretty
Like
good.
there's
I
a
mean,
big
obviously,
difference.
at one time he was traded for Taylor Hall, but I mean, if we're going down the
Exactly.
contract rabbit hole, look at the one
Yeah.
Hyman's about to get in Edmonton. We're saying we're going to give Zach Hyman an 8-year deal. What is that, Ken Holland? Like, if just to
That's their problem.
break down what the Oilers have done in the last 3 days is the funniest shit ever. Like, Ken Holland obviously took over from one of the worst GMs ever in Peter Chiarelli, or
To
one of
become
the
the worst
worst.
GM.
Right. And he's
Yeah.
clearly just followed his footsteps because
Yeah.
he went out and acquired a 38-year-old left-handed defenseman in Duncan Keith, who is now taking up 5.5 mil of their salary cap and had to be protected in the expansion draft,
Mm-hmm.
which was hilarious. You then offer Adam Larson the same amount of money as Seattle, and he chooses to walk away, which is
Right.
unreal. And then you go out and sign a 38-year-old goaltender you have proven you can't win playoff series with,
Yeah.
to a multi-year extension.
I think it was 2 years, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
two
But
two years.
what I don't understand is why they traded their 20th pick away. to Minnesota when
I
they could have picked up Wallstead as
You're
a goalie.
telling me, man. It
Like,
makes no sense. It's absolutely incredible. That's another thing they did was they had a chance to then take Jesper Wallstedt,
yeah,
who would
they
be
tra-
NHL ready, and they say
yeah,
2 years,
yeah,
and
like they
all of a
just trade him
sudden,
away.
no, they're like, nope, we're gonna go with this random center dude who is not going to be NHL ready for 4 years.
He's McDavid's replacement in 4 years.
It's just incredible. And then obviously top it off with a 7 or 8 year deal. We don't actually know yet, depending on what Kyle does for Zach Hyman,
Yeah,
who, if you're doing that, you're signing Hyman until he's 38 years old. Guy's physical and he plays such a hard-nosed game. He's not making it to 38 playing the way he does, or at least not on nearly the same level. So for me, I mean, Edmonton is a disaster. But you know what? I think one GM that you need to give a lot of credit to. I think Columbus did a fair job if you're going through the rebuild. But one GM that I actually really liked, or the trade I really liked, was Vancouver.
yeah, it was the
Um,
Vancouver Arizona trade
yeah,
with the OEL going the other way
I
and the
saw a lot
Garland.
of people giving Jim Benning some heat for this one, and I've always been a Jim Benning hater. I think he's over the years he hasn't been great,
Right.
but this trade to me, yes, you're obviously taking a larger contract back in OEL, and
Yeah.
yes, probably eventually it will look bad, but for
Well,
right
next year.
now, yeah, you get out from under Antoine Roussel, who is a terrible contract, Jay
Right.
Beagle, who is a terrible contract, and Louis Eriksson, who is the worst contract in hockey, who is just buried completely. You
Right.
save all that cap. You put the cap you were paying those guys into a player who's going to play for you, who's a
Right.
stud in
Yeah.
OEL. They got them to retain 1.2 mil on him, which is
Mhm.
fantastic. And you're getting a guy like Connor Garland thrown into that deal, who's, I mean, the Leafs want it, right? He's
Yeah.
a 25 goal, 60-point guy. Like he's
Right.
a really, really solid
The
player.
only thing with that trade is because Vancouver still got to sign Patterson and Hughes
Yes.
next year, I
Yep.
believe. Right. So like,
They do.
why trade for a large contract for Ekman Larson when you haven't even signed your two prospect, or like arguably your two best players?
I think part of it boils down to they realized that they needed to get better. And yeah, you're taking in. I think OEL is making 8.75. They retained 1.2, so it comes down to roughly 7.5. You're paying
Yeah.
OEL per year. Garland's not signed, so they're gonna have to come up with something to sign him because he's an RFA.
Right.
So you're gonna have to pay him. So let's say Garland makes. We'll estimate it here. We'll say like he makes $5 million a year. Might be low.
That's
might
an
be
overpay.
Yeah, it might
For
be. It
Garland,
might
that's
be.
an overpay.
It might be high. It might be low. Depends on the term.
Yeah.
But let's say you sign him to $5 million a year, right?
Yeah.
If you do that, then it breaks down to 12.5. You got out from under roughly 14 million contracts, so you're
Mhm.
saving yourself 2 mil there. But all those contracts expired next year, so you're locking yourself into a lot longer of a term. I do
Right.
think they will still be able to re-sign Pedersen and Hughes.
Well, they're gonna have
Obviously,
to.
yeah. At what
Yeah.
cost? We don't know. But then that's your core for the next 10 years. Like you're really not able to do anything else.
Right.
So,
You also said Montreal was looking in at a possible offer sheet for Patterson, right?
yeah, apparently it looks that way. They said that was if Carey Price was taken in the draft. But now
okay.
that Shea
Then they'd
Weber's
have
retired, it's almost the same, right? So they
right.
can
Yeah.
easily do it. Montreal is a very strange team right now. They have so much cap space. They're coming off that finals appearance, and
Mhm.
they have the ability now to get rid of Thomas Tatar, Philip Deneau. Shea Weber's obviously going to retire. They're going to have 30 million, 20, I think it's $26 million in cap space, and
Yeah.
the ability to do whatever they want. So if you can convince guys to come, Montreal's a great destination. I heard they're in on Eichel as well, so it's going to be a very interesting
There's
summer
just
for
a
them.
lot of construction going on in Montreal. I do not recommend it.
Yeah, Eichel, if you're listening, it's a hard pass on that. I would not go there.
A lot of one-way streets.
Exactly. And then obviously this was a crazy week in hockey. We get over to the NHL draft, which honestly we watched
I almost
together.
fell asleep. I almost
Man,
fell asleep.
The slowest
I literally
event.
almost fell asleep. It was the worst. I'm like, okay, I'm going home. I can't do this anymore.
It was horrible. It was one of the worst broadcasted events I've ever watched on live television. The picks took about 7 to 8 minutes per pick. They took forever to announce them. Like it was incredibly slow. And
Mhm.
also the usually when there's live and there's people, they'll give a breakdown of all the prospects. We didn't know who half the guys were who were getting taken. Like they did a terrible job of explaining all these
They
guys.
were literally talking about the guys like, oh, this guy's got sick flow. Look at the hat
my
he's wearing.
God. it was something else. And you know what, too? And we expected a lot of trades. Obviously, a lot of them happened pre-draft. So the only one we really got was Sam Reinhart to Florida.
Right.
And the only pick swaps we got was that stupid Edmonton trade who got rid of
I
Wallstedt.
think there was one more in the first round. There's another swap. I can't remember who it was, but I remember hearing there was one more.
Detroit moved
Yeah.
up to take their defenseman Evoldson, who was
Yeah.
very good at 15. Yes, that was actually not a bad trade. Stevie Y making moves there, but yeah, very slow event, and just not great television, unfortunately. NHL, who is really hyping it up with Seattle's first ever draft and their
Yeah.
first ever like big name player who's kind of going to play for them. So that
Mm-hmm.
was disappointing on that event, but a heck of a week for hockey. I can't wait for free agency, and it sounds as if with Reinhart going to Florida, like
Yeah.
Jack Eichel is the only guy left. You have Ristolainen going to Philly, Sam Reinhart going to Florida. Eichel's got to go somewhere because there's no way they move those guys without knowing Eichel's going to be on the move.
Hey, who knows? Who knows? Right? Like,
yeah,
we thought that New York would be the perfect destination for him, and there
I
were
think they
talks
still
rumbling.
are.
But like they had the first round pick available this year, and they didn't trade it.
So let me ask you this. Yeah, I mean, they're the type of team in New York that has so many prospects that I
Yeah.
think they could just do it in prospects if they wanted to. Like
Right.
they have 6 first rounders who are
Mm-hmm.
still in their system, just
Right.
due to, like the sheer picks that they've gotten in the past year. And also they moved Buchnevich for a second, which is crazy to me because he is a stud who played on their
Mm-hmm.
first line, and they got a second round pick and a guy who fights. Like, that makes no
Right.
sense. So something's clearly brewing in New York. I don't know if it guarantees them anything, but I think there's something there. But here's what I wanted to ask you. I got in a debate with our buddy who was on the podcast before, Luca, and he told me he thinks that a fair trade for Jack Eichel from Montreal's perspective would be Jesperi Kotkaniemi, the
Okay.
goalie Caden Premu,
Yeah.
and 2 first round picks. And I think that is the biggest load of shit.
Bro, there has to be a Caulfield return.
Has to be.
There has to be.
Caulfield
There's like
or
with that.
Suzuki, one of the two. You can't walk away with an Eichel deal without getting one of those two. If
Yeah.
you do, you're out of your mind. Or to me, I think you could probably give, if you wanted to do it prospects and picks, you could probably do Kotkaniemi, Caden Premu, Alexander Romanov, and 2 firsts. That may get it done. But I think if you're
Like the way like Caulfield played in the playoffs and at the end of the season for Montreal, and if you're in Buffalo, then you're like, yeah, that's my guy.
Plus, I think you're right. And also, if I'm the Buffalo GM, Kevin Adams, I'm thinking I'm not trading him within the division unless I get a haul. Like, I want everything. I want Caulfield. I want Suzuki. I want both until you tell me I can only have one, and then we'll continue the conversation. But I think that was a craziness thing. And I think if you're in New York and you're walking away with Eichel without giving away Lafreniere, I don't care what you give. Like, give them 5 prospects if you have to. I would do anything except laugh, and I think that you're walking away a winner in that scenario. But we'll see. The other debate we had, we got into a little Twitter row about debating goalies, and I think I'll let you explain it, just because I want to hear what your take was, because it's kind of hard to decipher on Twitter.
I think what you were trying to say, because I'm just trying to pull it up right now, actually.
Yeah.
But it was about the Nedeljkovic trade to Detroit.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And we were looking at basically the return that Carolina got for him.
Right.
And it was next to nothing. I'm just trying to pull it up right now.
The return they got was what, a 3rd round pick in Bernier, which Bernier's not even signed. Like, it was just a joke for a goalie who led the league with goals against average and save percentage. Granted, he played 23 games in the regular season.
Yeah.
But like, he's 23, he's the cornerstone and clearly your future netminder, and you trade him for a 3rd round pick. Like, to me, that is almost the worst trade I've heard of.
Yeah, it was
in
for
the
Bernier
last 10
in a
years.
third. Yeah, it was for Bernier in a third, and then Nedeljkovic signs a 2-year contract with Detroit at $3 million.
Unbelievable. Like, you're telling me as a GM you can't afford $3 million to your goaltender? That seems like a bargain. Bargain.
So in 31 games in the regular season, you said that he led the
league
goalies in
save
save
goals
percentage.
Against and save percentage, right?
Yeah. Okay. I like, so the argument that we were having, or the debate we were having, was that he won't, or no, I think you were saying that he'll still play well in Detroit next year, and I was trying to argue that he won't.
Yeah, the debate, well, at least to my recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Mm-hmm.
was that my point was that he's a far better goaltender than a Jonathan Bernier or a Thomas Greiss. He'll
Yeah.
go in there. I think it's inevitable that he won't put up the same numbers he did in Carolina. He'll be
Mm-hmm.
an improvement. But then you chimed in with, if a guy like Vaz was traded to Detroit, then he would put up very similar numbers from Tampa because he's the best goalie in the league.
That's what separates, great goalies or goalies from great goalies. Like Carey Price single-handedly carried the Habs to the finals this year and has won them many or countless games over the last, ever since he's been playing for the Habs, really. And the same thing with Vasilevsky. Obviously, the situation of Vasilevsky is very different from Carey Price's, where Tampa is just, it's completely the whole team Tampa has in front of, Vasilevsky is filthy. Like
Right. Yeah.
everyone's a stud on their team pretty
Of
much.
course.
Whereas in the Habs, it's not the same, right? So I guess in this situation, I should have just compared it more to a Carey Price rather
Yeah.
than Vasilevsky. But
the Carey Price is a weird one because he puts up like mediocre numbers or has in the last 5 years, and in
then
the
he turns it
playoffs
up when
he's
it matters.
unbelievable.
Well,
But
that's
that's the
when it
thing; it's like
matters.
you have to make the playoffs, which
Yeah.
like in the Canadian division, great, it's all good and dandy. You probably can, but in the Atlantic that we have now, it's crazy. Like, good luck, Montreal. Like, you're telling me they're going to outbeat Florida. Like, Florida to me is a lock for the playoffs. Tampa's
I don't think
obviously
so.
a lock.
I don't think Florida's a lock, and the only reason why is
Oh
because
wow,
it all comes down to their goalies.
we got
Like
Spencer Knight
like
now.
yeah, I know, but it's just one playoffs that he's played, right?
Yeah, I mean
So
he'd be in a
like
tandem with Bobrovsky, obviously. But yeah,
yeah,
I know what you mean.
my two locks right now. I only because obviously only four make it, right? And then there's a fifth wild card
Yeah,
if it's from the same division. Or sorry, no, the way it would work is the top three would make it,
yeah, and there's a
right?
fourth wild card.
And then there's well, fourth and fifth can be both wild cards
Yeah,
if you beat out the other division, which is
right.
the Metropolitan Division, right? So I only have two Atlantic locks right now, and that's Boston and Tampa
Yeah, for
right now.
sure.
And I'm not going to put Toronto into it because we don't know
I
what
don't think we're
team
a
they're
lock
going
at
into,
all. Yeah, no
right?
chance.
So that's the only two teams I have right now in the Atlantic Division that's locked for playoffs, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think for sure Boston, for sure Tampa. To me, I think Florida's almost as good a lock as you can get. Just they've added
Mm-hmm.
Sam Reinhart, they're getting Ekblad back, and
Yeah.
they even outperformed Tampa last year in the regular season.
The
So
only thing with Boston is their goalie situation of what they're going to do, because I don't know if Tuukka Rask is going back or what
yeah,
they're
yeah,
doing with Halak or their rookie prospect that they have. That's the only question mark on Boston because they signed Taylor Hall to a 4-year deal yesterday or the day before,
such a good deal,
right?
6 million. Yeah,
So like their top six is filthy. Their defense is looking gross as well.
yeah.
So it's just the question mark is just their goalies. Like what are they doing with that situation?
Yeah, but just to like bring it back to the point we were talking about, it's like, yeah, Carey can carry you, um, pun intended, to the playoffs and be a stud there, but it's getting there that's going to be a problem. And if he doesn't perform like he did in the playoffs in the regular season next year,
Mm-hmm.
Montreal doesn't have a hope in hell of getting to the
I think
playoffs.
Montreal. This is obviously an early take, but I think Montreal
Yeah.
beats out Florida to make the playoffs.
Oh man, I would
I
put
I can see it happening.
so much money
Only
against
only
that.
reason why I can see it happening is because Shea Weber is replaceable, right?
How?
You can bring that Savardin. He's
Yeah,
literally the
but I
exact
mean,
same player.
like,
Well,
I mean,
it's not there.
like,
Yeah, it's not there yet, but it's a possibility,
he's not
right?
offensively the same,
Price,
but he's
they're
defensively the
they're
same. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you're looking at offensively, how many points does Weber have last season? Not
Uh,
many. Not what he used to have,
yeah,
right?
but
So
he was statistically, like, the last few years, he was still a very good defenseman.
yeah,
Like, he wasn't
like
bad at all
Shea Weber,
offensively
he
either.
yeah, but still he is replaceable. Whereas in if you I like if there were recent reports with Carey Price saying that he'll be back for October 13th,
Yeah.
right? So he's healthy again, right? And if he continues to play where basically start continue where he left off of, then they're going to be a great team again to just not only watch but also play on ice. So
Yeah, I completely agree. But at the same time, like, okay, so I pulled it up. Savard, or rather Shea Weber, has a total of 33 points in 48 games, which was
Yeah, which is
incredible.
great for a defenseman. Yeah.
And that Savard had 6 points in a total of
Well,
54
also
games.
Savard is also playing third line minutes compared to Weber's first line minutes.
For sure, but on
Right.
Columbus, Savard was playing top four. He's just not an offensive defenseman, right?
But
Like
what? Yeah,
Shea Weber is.
so I'm
So you're
talking about
losing that.
more of I guess you're losing the offensive side, right? But that's where your rookies come in, and Kyle Field that we saw earlier. What I'm talking more of the defensive aspect of it is protecting the puck from going into the net and also helping out Carey Price.
I think as we spoke on it a little bit earlier, like Montreal's got a lot of work to do if they want to make the playoffs. Philip Deneau is almost an impossible replacement. The guy's one of the best two-way centers in the league. He's probably, I would put him as a top 5 shutdown center. Like his ability to neutralize stars is incredible. So for him, I think that's a very difficult thing. If he walks, like you kind of have a problem replacing him. Thomas Tatar, I feel like you could go get a guy like Mike Hoffman, similar player. Like he'll probably add to the power play a little bit. He's replaceable. But if you lose Shea Weber and Philip Deneau, like it kind of boils down to the fact that players don't want to sign in Montreal. Like you'd have to go out and trade for somebody because like I can't tell you the last big name free agent that signed in Montreal.
Players. I think it's like see that's what I don't ever understand of players not wanting to sign for a team or because of the city and whatnot. Like you're getting paid. It's basically your job. Go do it. Simple as that. Like if you look at the post pressers after the cup finals with the way Perry talked about the city and Deneau talked about the city and Gallagher talked about the city and everyone else. Everyone loves playing in Montreal. It's the same as playing in Toronto. It's the same as playing anywhere else. It's just getting there is the hardest part.
I think the reason players don't want to sign there is because of the tax bracket. Like you look at if you sign in New Jersey or you sign in Tampa, you get paid zero. You have a 0% state tax.
Right.
So you're making like $2 million more than you would be making on a $7 million contract versus Montreal. So that's obviously a massive incentive. But it also comes down to like, I don't know. I think the last big name free agent I can remember signing to a Canadian city is obviously
Eric
John
Stahl.
Tavares. Eric Stahl. John Tavares is the last one I can remember. And then in terms of Montreal, maybe Brian Giunta, and that was a $5 million contract. So there is something to be said that they have their work cut out for them in terms of replacing players. Because, Shea Weber came via trade. And so obviously it's not like he had the choice there. And obviously that's why I think to me, Jack Eichel makes so much sense for the Canadians because you're getting a guy who's locked to a 7-year deal still. And he can't go anywhere and he'll be making significantly less money and you get a guy who's arguably top 5 in the league. So
if the Habs somehow end up getting Eichel and have Suzuki and Caulfield on the same team, that's me crazy.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, to me, that would set up the craziest division I think we've ever had in our lifetime. Like if they had ended up getting Eichel, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 punch would be absolutely crazy. The playoff race would be just nuts. Because I mean, they would be at that point. Obviously, Suzuki and Caulfield are not on Marner and Tavares' level yet, but they easily could be at some point. So
that's debatable, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Caulfield looks like from the brief stint we've had. Yeah, he could be a 30, 35 goal scorer consistently. Yeah. Obviously, that's a lot. That's like a big thing to throw out.
He's going to be another DeBrincat. Like, DeBrincat scored, 33 last year?
Yeah, DeBrincat had a 40-goal year.
Yeah.
People don't talk about it. Yeah.
So, like Caulfield's that guy. Like,
exactly. I agree.
It's just, people are hating on him for no reason, but he's that guy.
No, I completely agree. It would make for an absolutely nuts division. So I'm excited to see where he goes. The next thing, breaking it down, we're kind of jumping all over the place with these hockey things just because there's so much to talk about. But the next thing I wanted to talk about quickly was just the Olympics of note. Not a lot to tell on there. It's only been the first couple days. We turned on the opening ceremony, kind of a weird one with no fans a little bit there. It was a strange situation.
That's how boring the draft was that we started watching the opening.
Switched over to the Olympics opening ceremony. But shout out to Penny Alexiak, who brought home the silver medal last night in the most insane last leg of a swimming race I've ever seen. Like, swimming is the most underrated sport to watch. It is incredible. She went into the pool behind by a massive margin and then swam and came all the way back to secure the silver for Canada. So that was shout out to her. Jamie signs a massive contract with Seattle, and she goes out and wins a silver medal for Canada. Hell of a day for the Alexiak family. And then also France beating USA basketball this morning.
I
You
don't understand that.
you talk about a thing like of all the stuff that's gone on in the States, you would have said, oh, they got basketball on lock though. Like you would think that would be something they would have. Like Kobe went 36-0 as a member of Team USA. They hadn't lost in 25 matches, and they lose the first game to a team of like no names apart from Rudy
Hmm.
Gobert and Evan Fournier. It was
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. But anyways, I think that'll do it for this week. We'll leave it there. I think next week we'll be bringing in maybe a guest, and we'll be talking about some football and start to jump into the fantasy situation that's coming up here in the next few weeks. So that'll be really exciting. Stay tuned for that, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening.